The sky above Varos was the color of a fresh bruise. Purple clouds swollen and heavy churned in slow apocalyptic spirals. The air tasted of copper and ash. Standing on the obsidian ridge, Thalia Vance pressed her eye to the scope of her railgun and watched a man fall from the sky. He tumbled through the violet atmosphere like a broken doll. No parachute, no wings, just a body limp and spinning until he hit the black sand hard enough to leave a crater. The impact sent up a plume of dust that hung in the thick air like smoke. Thalia's finger hovered over the recording button on her wrist console. She pressed it. A small red light blinked to life. Subject 7743 deployed, she said, her voice flat and professional. Timestamp 0800 hours Varos local, awaiting confirmation of termination. Through the scope, she watched the man. He wasn't moving. The sand around him was darkening. Blood, she thought, or maybe just the rain. On Varos, it was hard to tell the difference. The rain here didn't fall like water. It fell like needles, each drop sharp enough to pierce skin. Thalia adjusted the magnification. The man's face came into focus. 30s maybe. Dark hair matted with blood. A strong jaw clenched against the pain. His flight suit was torn at the shoulder, revealing a jagged wound that wept crimson into the black sand. Subject appears incapacitated, Thalia reported. Estimated survival time 4 to 6 hours without intervention. Environmental factors will handle the rest. She lowered the scope. Her orders were clear. Observe, document. Do not interfere. Let Varos do what Varos does best, erase mistakes. But as she watched, the man moved. It was a small movement, just his hand curling into a fist, then his other hand. He planted both palms in the sand and pushed. His arms shook with the effort. Gravity on Varos was 15% heavier than Earth standard. It made every movement a battle. The man got to his knees, then impossibly to his feet. He swayed, listing to one side like a ship taking on water. But he didn't fall. Thalia felt something strange in her chest. Not quite admiration, not quite surprise. Something unnamed and unwelcome. She raised the scope again. The man was looking around, taking stock of his situation. His eyes swept across the bone-white thorn bushes, the jagged obsidian spires, the sky that promised nothing but suffering. He looked down at his wound, pressed his hand against it, and kept it there. Then he started walking. Not toward shelter. There was no shelter. Not toward water. There was no water visible for miles. He walked toward the wreckage of the survival pod, half buried in a drift of ash 100 yards away. Smart, Thalia thought. Salvage first, survival second. She watched him stumble and catch himself. Watched him press forward despite the pain. Despite the rain that struck his exposed neck like tiny knives. Despite the crushing weight of a planet that didn't want him alive. 48 hours ago, Thalia had stood in her father's office on the Coalition flagship. The room was all white marble and gold trim, the kind of wealth that forgot it was wealth because it had never known anything else. Patriarch Aldrich Vance sat behind a desk carved from a single piece of Terran oak. Real wood, impossibly expensive. He didn't look up when she entered. Thalia, he said, his voice carrying the weight of empires, you've been selected for a special assignment. She stood at attention, hands clasped behind her back. Perfect posture, perfect calm, everything her training had demanded since she was old enough to speak. I am honored, Father. Aldrich finally looked up. His eyes were the same pale gold as hers, but colder. So much colder. There's a man, he said, an engineer, former DARPA. He exposed one of our weapons programs to the Senate, made things very complicated for people who prefer simplicity. He slid a data tablet across the desk. Thalia picked it up. The file showed a face. Strong features. Dark eyes that looked directly at the camera with something that might have been defiance or might have been exhaustion. Declan Harrow, age 32, specialty advanced fabrication systems. Crime treason. He's being beheaded to Varos, Aldrich continued. Your assignment is simple. Observe, document, confirm he breaks. When he does, file the report and come home. Thalia scrolled through the file. Declan Harrow had a sister, Emily. She was sick, terminal. The medical bills were astronomical. DARPA had promised to cover them if he stayed quiet about the weapons program. He talked anyway. This one is different, Aldrich said, leaning back in his chair. He had everything to lose and nothing to gain. He chose principle over pragmatism. That kind of stubbornness needs to be documented, studied, and ultimately disproven. He stood walking to the window that overlooked the fleet. Hundreds of ships hung in formation, a constellation of power and control. You've been trained since childhood to observe without attachment, he said, to analyze without emotion, to see the world as it is, not as we wish it to be. This is your final examination. Thalia met his eyes. And if he doesn't break, Aldrich smiled, it didn't reach his eyes. Everyone breaks, daughter. Varos doesn't allow exceptions. Now standing on the ridge with Varos's poisoned wind tearing at her envoy suit, Thalia watched Declan Harrow reach the pod. He dropped to his knees beside it, breathing hard. The rain had soaked through his flight suit. His lips were turning blue. He forced open the survival pod's seal with shaking hands. Inside, nothing. The pod had been stripped bare. Standard protocol for drop site subjects. No rations, no water, no beacon. Just a stamped warning on the hull: quarantine zone. No extraction. Declan stared at those words for a long moment. Then he laughed. It was a broken sound, half cough, half sob. But it was a laugh nonetheless. He ran his hand over the letters' fingers, tracing the lie they represented. There was no quarantine, no disease, just inconvenience, just political expedience, just people like Thalia's father disposing of problems. Thalia's hand tightened on her railgun. She told herself she was just maintaining her grip. She told herself the tension in her jaw was from the cold. She told herself she wasn't bothered by the fact that she'd seen men die on Varos before and never once felt the need to look away. Declan stood. He turned in a slow circle, surveying the wasteland. Then he did something that made Thalia lean forward despite herself. He took inventory, not of what he'd lost, of what he had. One survival knife still sheathed at his belt. One emergency battery pack surprisingly intact. The plastic shielding from the pod seat, which could be repurposed. His own knowledge, his own hands, his own stubborn refusal to die conveniently. He got to work. First the wound. Thalia watched through the scope as he tore strips from his undershirt, wadded them against the gash, and tied them tight with pieces of wire from the pod wreckage. The pain must have been extraordinary. His face went white. Sweat broke out on his forehead despite the cold. But his hands stayed steady. Next, water. He hacked away at the white thorn bushes with the survival knife, clearing a space at their base. He dug a shallow pit in the ash, lined it with plastic from the pod, and placed a cold stone in the center. Then he stretched more plastic over the hole, weighing down the edges with rocks. A fog trap. Primitive. Inefficient. Brilliant. Condensation would gather on the plastic and drip into the liner. It would taste foul. It might make him sick, but it would keep him alive another day. Thalia's wrist console beeped softly. A message from the handler assigned to monitor her assignment. Initial impressions. She looked at Declan, who was now trying to build shelter against the coming night. The temperature on Varos dropped catastrophically after sunset. Without heat, without insulation, he would be dead by morning. She typed subject displays above average resourcefulness. Survival instinct strong, will require extended observation. The response came immediately: approved. Maintain distance, do not engage. Thalia deleted the conversation and returned to her scope. The cold came with nightfall like a physical blow. The temperature plummeted from scorching to freezing in less than an hour. Thalia, safe in her temperature-regulated envoy suit, watched Declan huddle in the lee of the pod wreckage. He had fashioned a crude shelter from the torn seat cushions and plastic shielding. It was pathetic, inadequate, but it was something. He curled into a ball inside it, arms wrapped around himself, shivering so hard she could see it from 100 yards away. Then she heard the sound. It came from the canyon to the west, a high-pitched, oscillating shriek that vibrated in the teeth. Thalia's blood went cold. She knew that sound. Reavers. Through the scope, she saw them flowing down the canyon walls like oil. 6 of them. Pack hunters. Their bodies were sleek and black, all muscle, and serrated bone ridges where teeth should be. They moved with terrifying, coordinated intelligence. They'd picked up Declan's scent. Blood in the sand, sweat and fear. To them, he was prey. Declan heard them coming. He scrambled out of his shelter, grabbing the survival knife. It looked absurdly small in his hand. The Reavers spread out in a classic kill formation, two flanking left, two flanking right, the Alpha approaching head-on, the sixth circling behind. Thalia's finger found the trigger of her railgun. Her orders were clear. Orders were, do not interfere. Let nature take its course. Let Varos do what it does. The Alpha Reaver tensed, preparing to spring. Declan raised the knife jaw, set eyes clear. He wasn't going to run. He was going to make them pay for every inch. Thalia thought of her father, of his cold smile, of the words he'd spoken. Everyone breaks. She thought of the file, of Emily Harrow dying in a hospital bed while her brother rotted in a political prison. She thought of the laugh, that broken, defiant laugh when Declan had seen the words, no extraction. Her finger tightened on the trigger. The crack of the railgun split the night. The Alpha's head exploded in a mist of dark blood. Its body collapsed mid-leap, momentum carrying it forward to land at Declan's feet. The other 5 Reavers froze, confused by the sudden death of their leader. Thalia fired again. The Reaver on the left spun in a circle, a hole punched clean through its spine. It dropped without a sound. The remaining 4 didn't hesitate. They turned as one and vanished back up the canyon walls, melting into shadows with impossible speed. Silence crashed down over the wasteland. Declan stood in the dark, knife still raised, breathing hard. He looked at the 2 dead Reavers. Then he looked up at the ridge where Thalia crouched. She didn't move. Her suit's stealth field was active. He couldn't see her, not clearly, but he knew she was there. Show yourself, he shouted, his voice cracked from thirst and exhaustion. The wind swallowed his words. Thalia stayed perfectly still. Every instinct she'd been trained to follow screamed at her to remain hidden, to observe, to document, to maintain the integrity of the experiment. But she'd already broken that integrity the moment she pulled the trigger. She stood. The stealth field shimmered and died. She became visible on the ridge, a pale figure in the darkness, railguns still trained downward. Declan stared up at her. Even from this distance, she could see the war playing out on his face. Relief that he wasn't alone, suspicion about why she'd helped, anger at needing help at all. Coalition, he called out. Thalia didn't answer. She slung the railgun across her back and started down the ridge. The loose shale slid under her boots, sending small avalanches of black stone cascading ahead of her. When she reached the bottom, she stopped 10 feet away from him. Up close, he looked worse than she'd thought. The makeshift bandage on his side was soaked through. His face was gray under the blood and grime, but his eyes were sharp, alert, calculating. You're no exile, he said. It wasn't a question. Thalia said nothing. That suit, Declan continued, gesturing with the knife. That's a diplomatic envoy suit. High grade, kinetic dampener weave. And that rifle, that's a Spectre-class railgun. Prisoners don't get hardware like that. He took a step closer. Thalia's hand moved instinctively toward the sidearm at her hip. Declan stopped. So what are you, he asked. Warden executioner? Or just my personal audience? Thalia met his eyes. In the darkness, hers glowed faintly gold. A Cassian trait, luminescent irises that had evolved for hunting in low light. I'm an observer, she said. Her voice was calm, professional. The voice of someone who'd been trained never to let emotion touch her words. Observer. Declan laughed, that same broken sound she'd heard at the pod. You're watching me die. I'm watching you survive. Same thing on Varos. He wasn't wrong. Thalia pulled a small silver canister from her belt and tossed it to him. He caught it one-handed, never taking his eyes off her. Medical sealant, she said. Spray it on the wound. It'll stop the infection. Declan looked at the canister, then at her. Why? It was the question Thalia had been asking herself since she pulled the trigger. She had no good answer. No answer her father would accept. No answer that wouldn't damn her in the eyes of the coalition. Because survival is statistically improbable alone, she said, and because I require data. It was a lie, but it was a lie that fit the mission parameters. A lie that let her sleep tonight without calling herself a traitor. Declan studied her for a long moment. Then he popped the seal on the canister and sprayed the foam over his burn. The relief was immediate. His shoulders sagged. A shudder ran through him that had nothing to do with cold. Thank you, he said quietly. Thalia flinched. It was a small movement, a tightening of her jaw, a slight recoil of her head. But Declan saw it. His eyes narrowed. What? He asked. You thanked me. You gave me medicine. That's how it works. Talia stared at him. In her culture, gratitude was weakness, acknowledgement of debt, admission that you couldn't survive alone. High-caste Cassians didn't thank. They didn't apologize. They certainly didn't show vulnerability to strangers, but this wasn't a Cassian standing in front of her. This was a human, a species her teachers had called emotionally incontinent, chemically chaotic, dangerously empathetic. And he had just said thank you like it was the most natural thing in the world. "You're an anomaly, Declan Harrow," she said. His eyes widened. "You know my name. I know everything about you." The temperature had dropped below freezing. Declan's breath came out in white clouds. He was shivering again, the adrenaline from the Reaver attack wearing off. "We need to move," Thalia said. "There are others, exiles, a camp 3 days north. You won't survive the journey alone. And you're just going to escort me out of the goodness of your heart." Thalia adjusted the rifle on her back. "I'm going to escort you because my mission requires you alive, for now." It was the most honest thing she'd said since landing on Varos. Declan looked at her for a long time, then he sheathed his knife. "Lead the way, observer." They walked through the night. Thalia set a brutal pace, forcing Declan to keep moving despite his exhaustion. If he stopped, he'd die. If he slowed, the cold would take him. So he kept walking, one foot in front of the other, following the faint glow of her eyes in the darkness. Thalia didn't speak. Neither did Declan. But she was acutely aware of his presence behind her. The sound of his breathing, the scrape of his boots on stone, the occasional stumble when his strength faltered. And she was aware of something else, something her training had warned her about but never quite prepared her for. Human pheromones. Cassians had evolved a heightened sensitivity to biochemical signals. It helped them hunt, helped them identify threats, helped them navigate the complex social hierarchies of their species. But it also made them dangerously susceptible to human chemistry. Stress, adrenaline, fear. The hormones humans produced in crisis situations triggered something primal in the Cassian nervous system, a bonding response, an override of logic. Her teachers had called it contamination, a weakness to be guarded against. Walking ahead of Declan Harrow, breathing the same air, Thalia felt that contamination spreading through her like a slow poison. Every time he pushed through the pain, every time he refused to quit, despite impossible odds, her body responded. Her pulse quickened, her skin flushed. The gold in her eyes brightened. She told herself it was just biology, just chemistry, nothing more. But when dawn broke and she turned to check on him, seeing him still standing, still moving, still alive, against every statistical probability, she felt something that had nothing to do with pheromones and everything to do with the part of her she'd spent 30 years trying to kill. Respect. They reached the monolith as the red sun climbed above the horizon. It stood in the center of an ancient crater, a slab of black stone 3 stories tall. The surface was perfectly smooth, unmarred by the sandstorms that had stripped everything else down to bone. As they approached, deep blue lines of light began to trace geometric patterns across its face. The glyphs shifted and churned, rearranging themselves like living things. Declan stopped walking. He stared up at the monolith with an expression Thalia couldn't quite read. "What is this?" he whispered. "Ancient technology," Thalia said. "Pre-coalition. Pre-everything. This planet wasn't always a wasteland." "What was it?" "A test site." The glyphs stabilized, forming jagged, blocky letters that Declan could read, "build or be erased." He stood there for a long moment, reading those words over and over. Then he reached out and pressed his palm against the cold stone. The monolith hummed. A pulse of blue light swept over him, scanning him from head to toe. It felt like walking through a static field. The glyphs churned again, faster this time, until they settled into a new configuration. Civilization Index 0. Empathy Quotient Viable. Survival Probability 0.03%. Thalia read the words and felt her blood run cold. 0.03%. 3 chances in 10,000. Those were execution odds. Those were the numbers you gave it to a dead man walking. But Declan was smiling. "A test," he said, looking at Thalia. "This whole thing is a test." "Yes. And if we create something, what then?" Thalia thought of her father, of the ledger she'd seen once in his office, listing investors in the drop site program. She thought of the subscriptions sold to watch exiles fight and die for entertainment. Then you prove you deserve to live, she said carefully. Declan turned back to the monolith. He placed both hands on the stone, now leaning his weight against it. Build or be erased, he repeated. Not much of a choice. It's the only choice you have. He looked at her over his shoulder. What about you? What's your choice in all this? Thalia didn't answer. She couldn't, because the truth was she didn't know anymore. They found the camp at midday on the third day. It was a sprawling wreck of a settlement built from starship scrap and tanned predator hides. A perimeter fence made of razor wire and sharpened bone encircled the structures. In the center, a sputtering fusion generator coughed blue smoke into the air, powering a ring of floodlights that kept the shadows at bay. 500 souls, maybe more. Humans, Keth, avians, dozens of species, all wearing the same expression of exhausted desperation. At the main gate, 3 figures emerged to meet them. The one in the center was a Keth warrior. 7 feet tall, scales the color of dried blood, a heavy pulse rifle slung across his chest. Halt, the Keth hissed. His name was Cross Vex. Thalia knew this because she'd read his file. Former military, imprisoned for refusing an order to execute civilians. Declan stopped. He held his hands out from his sides, showing he was unarmed. Just passing through, he said. Cross sniffed the air. His slit pupils narrowed. Fresh meat and perfume, he growled. He looked at Thalia. She stood tall, her envoy suit gleaming despite the dust. She looked like a diamond in a sewer. Nice gear, one of the human guards muttered, shifting his grip on his makeshift spear. Thalia knew this moment. She'd been trained for it. The moment when the desperate looked at the powerful and decided whether to submit or strike. The moment when everything hung on a knife's edge. She had 2 choices: assert dominance through violence, or offer value through service. Her training said violence. But she'd spent 3 days watching Declan Harrow choose service over survival. Choose principle over pragmatism. Choose building over breaking. We're looking for water, Thalia said, keeping her voice calm, and we're willing to trade labor for it. Cross laughed. It was an ugly sound. We have labor. We have water. We don't have you. He raised the rifle. Declan didn't flinch. He didn't look at the gun. He looked at Cross's boots. They were falling apart, wrapped in wire to keep the soles attached. You have a busted condenser, Declan said. Cross froze. What? I can hear it from here, Declan said, gesturing toward the camp. That generator is misfiring on the 3rd cycle. Your intake valves are clogged with ash. You're getting half power and maybe 30% water purity. Am I right? The Keth lowered the rifle an inch. Declan continued. I'm an engineer. I can fix it. Or you can shoot us, eat us, and die of thirst in a week when that intake finally seizes up. Your call. The silence stretched. Dangerous. Heavy. Then Cross grunted. Open it. The gate groaned open. As Declan walked through, Thalia fell into step beside him. But as she passed Cross, the Keth recoiled, his nostrils flaring. Coalition, he snarled. The word went through the nearby scavengers like an electric shock. Heads turned, eyes widened. She's a spy, someone whispered. Look at the suit. That's a warden. Thalia felt the moment shifting, felt the hate focusing on her like a laser. These people had been thrown away by the coalition, tortured by it, erased by it, and she stood before them wearing its symbols like a flag. Declan stepped between Thalia and the crowd. She's with me, he said loudly. She's a defector. It was a weak lie, but it bought them a second. Just a second. Enough for Cross to weigh his options. The Keth glared at Thalia with pure, unadulterated hate. But the promise of water outweighed the desire for revenge. For now. Fix the condenser, Cross growled. Then we decide if you live. The work took 4 hours. Declan went elbow deep in the machinery, scrubbing filters with solvent he distilled from local berries. Thalia stood guard, her back to the machine, her hand hovering near her sidearm. The camp residents watched her with hunger and terror. She represented everything they'd lost, everything that had condemned them. Why do you do it? Thalia asked quietly, not turning her head. Do what? Declan asked, wrenching a bolt tight. Help them. They would have killed you for your boots. They're thirsty, Thalia. It's hard to be polite when your tongue is swelling up. He wiped grease on his pants and kicked the starter motor. The condenser coughed, sputtered, and then roared to life. The chaotic rattling smoothed out into a steady, rhythmic hum. Clear, cold water began to fill the collection tank. A cheer went up from the nearest watchers. It was ragged but real. Cross walked over, inspecting the flow. He dipped a claw and tasted it and grunted. Acceptable. Declan extended a greasy hand. Name's Declan. Cross looked at the hand, then grasped the forearm in a warrior's grip. Cross. And the lady, Cross asked, looking at Talia. She's the one who keeps me from talking too much, Declan said. They were given a corner of a rusted hangar to sleep in. It wasn't luxury, but it was out of the wind. That night, the camp didn't sleep. It waited. Thalia sat against the wall, her railgun across her lap. Declan sat across from her, cleaning his knife with a scrap of cloth. You didn't have to lie, she said. About what? Calling me a defector. Declan looked up. Wasn't it true? Thalia thought about the moment she pulled the trigger. The moment she chose to save him instead of watch him die. The moment she broke every rule she'd been raised to follow. I don't know what I am anymore, she said quietly. Then figure it out, Declan said, because tomorrow they're going to ask. And if you can't answer, we're both dead. The alarm came an hour before dawn. Not a siren, a scream. Raiders, Cross roared from the gate. Ferals. They came from the darkness like a wave of locusts, not organized scavengers. These were the broken ones. Men and women who had snapped under the pressure of Varos, turning into cannibals and berserkers. They wore the flayed skins of predators and painted their faces with ash. They hit the gate with a battering ram made of stone and bone. The metal buckled. Thalia grabbed her rifle. Declan grabbed his iron bar from the scrap pile. Around them, the camp erupted into chaos. People running, hiding, trampling each other. Stand fast, Declan bellowed, his voice a command deck roar. If they get in, we all die. Form a line. Cross was at the breach, firing his pulse rifle until it clicked dry. The gate gave way with a screech of tearing metal. The ferals poured in. Declan stepped forward. He swung the iron bar, catching the first raider in the chest. The impact jarred his arms to the shoulders, but the man went down. Then the chaos swallowed him. Thalia raised her railgun. She had a clear shot at a dozen targets. Ferals streaming through the breach. Easy kills. Efficient. Professional. But Declan was in the middle of it, fighting with brutal desperation. If she fired, she might hit him. Might kill the very person she'd been sent to observe. She made her choice. Thalia dropped the railgun, drew her combat blade, and stepped into the fight. She moved like water, deflected a spear thrust, broke an attacker's arm, kicked him into the path of another raider. It wasn't desperate fighting. It was choreography. Elite military suppression tactics adapted for close quarters. She cleared a circle around Declan in 10 seconds. He scrambled up, breathless. He looked at her. She wasn't even panting. Her face was a mask of concentration. Her eyes burned with that high-beam gold light. Cover the left flank, she ordered. Declan obeyed. They fought back-to-back for 20 minutes. Cross rallied the defenders. The ferals, realizing this wasn't a slaughter but a battle, broke and ran. Silence returned to the camp. Thalia stood in the plaza, surrounded by bodies. Her envoy suit was splattered with blood, not hers. Declan leaned on his iron bar, watching her. She was checking a fallen raider for vitals, her movements clinical and precise. You're not a diplomat, he said quietly. Thalia straightened. She met his eyes. No, she said. I'm not. What are you? She thought of her training, the years of combat drills, the assassination protocols, the cold efficiency drilled into her since childhood. I was trained to survive, she said. You were trained to kill, Declan corrected. There's a difference about this. Talia looked at her hands, at the blood drying on her fingers, at the evidence of what she was. Yes, she said softly. There is. Behind them, the sun was rising. The red light spilled across the camp, painting everything in shades of rust and amber. In that light, Talia saw something she'd never seen before on Varos. Hope. The survivors were emerging from their shelters, not running, not hiding. They were helping the wounded, organizing cleanup, reinforcing the gate, working together, building. Thalia looked at Declan. He was bleeding from a cut on his brow, leaning on the iron bar like an old man, exhausted and hurt, and still standing. What did you do? She whispered. I didn't do anything, Declan said. They did. They chose to stand. They chose to fight. They chose each other. Why Husha? Because someone showed them it was possible. Talia realized then what she'd witnessed. Not just a battle, a transformation. The moment when a collection of prisoners stopped being victims and became something else. A community. And she had been part of it. Not as an observer, not as a speaker, as a participant, as a defender, as one of them. Her wrist console beeped. A message from the handler. Status report overdue. Respond immediately. Thalia looked at the message, then at the camp, then at Declan. She reached down and pulled the small emergency beacon from her belt, the one that would call for extraction, the one that would end the mission and bring her home to her father's flagship. She held it in her hand, feeling its weight. Then she threw it to the ground and crushed it under her boot. The plastic shattered. The light died. The connection severed. Declan stared at her. What did you just do? I chose, Dahlia said. Chose what? She looked at him, at the man who had refused to die conveniently, who had built water from fog and civilization from despair, who had shown her that there was something worth choosing beyond duty and orders. To stay, she said, to see this through, to witness what happens when someone refuses to be erased. Declan studied her face. Then slowly he extended his hand. Thalia took it. His grip was rough, warm, human. And for the first time in her life, shaking hands didn't feel like admitting weakness. It felt like coming home. The morning after the Farrells broke against their walls, Thalia Vance stood in the camp plaza and watched something impossible happen. People were rebuilding, not just repairing, rebuilding. The difference mattered. Repair was survival, rebuild was hope. A group of humans and Keth worked together to reinforce the shattered gate, welding scrap metal with plasma torches scavenged from a dozen different ships. An avian medic named Kale moved among the wounded, his feathered hands surprisingly gentle as he set broken bones and stitched gashes. Children, small and wide-eyed, carried water to the workers in dented canteens. No one was hoarding, no one was fighting over scraps. They were pooling resources, sharing labor, acting like citizens instead of prisoners. Thalia didn't understand it. Her training had been explicit. Under stress, biological units reverted to predation, competition, tribalism. The strong consume the weak. That was the law of nature refined by centuries of Cassian philosophy. But here the weak were being fed first. She watched a Keth warrior, massive and scarred, kneel down to help a human child tie her bootlaces. Watched a human woman share her ration with an avian who'd lost his in the chaos. Watched Cross Vex, who had nearly executed them yesterday, organize work crews with military precision and surprising patience. Doesn't make sense, does it? Thalia turned. Declan stood beside her, his face bruised from the fight, a fresh bandage wrapped around his ribs. He held 2 tin cups of something that smelled vaguely like coffee, but probably wasn't. He offered her one. She took it. Entropy, Thalia said. Systems degrade toward chaos, not order. Human systems, Declan said, are weird. They stood in silence, drinking the not coffee. It tasted like burnt dirt and regret. Thalia drank it anyway. You're different this morning, Declan observed. How? You're not taking notes. Thalia's hand went instinctively to her wrist console. The recording light was off, had been off since she crushed the beacon. No data streaming back to her handler. No reports being filed, no evidence being collected. She was off the grid, off mission, off the map entirely. I destroyed my extraction protocol, she said quietly. I know, I watched you do it. That was treason. I'm familiar with the concept. Talia looked at him, at the man who'd thrown away everything for principle, who'd chosen exposure over silence, prison over complicity. Do you regret it? She asked, blowing the whistle on DARPA. Declan was quiet for a moment. He stared into his cup like it held answers. My sister Emily, he said finally. She's dying, genetic disorder. The treatment costs more than I'd make in 10 lifetimes. DARPA offered to cover it all. Experimental trials, best doctors, everything. In exchange for silence. In exchange for silence. He took a sip of the terrible coffee. I took the deal. Spent 6 months watching them build weapons designed to target civilian infrastructure. Drones that could identify and eliminate high-value soft targets. That's what they called schools, Thalia. hospitals, refugee centers. His jaw tightened. I broke the deal, went to the Senate, testified under oath. DARPA pulled Emily's funding the same day. She died 3 weeks later. Thalia felt something cold settle in her chest. I'm sorry. Don't be. I made the choice. I'd make it again. He looked at her. Some things you can't unsee, some lines you can't uncross. You just have to decide what you can live with. And you can live with your sister's death. No, Declan said simply. I'll carry that until I die. But I can look at myself in the mirror. That's worth something. Thalia thought of her own reflection, of the woman who had spent 30 years becoming the perfect instrument of her father's will, who'd observed suffering without flinching, who'd filed reports on human misery like it was data in a spreadsheet, who'd pulled a trigger to save a stranger and shattered everything she'd been built to be. I don't know what I'm becoming, she said. Good, Declan replied. That means you're still choosing. That afternoon, Declan called a meeting. He stood on a crate in the center of the plaza cross at his side. 500 faces turned toward him, hungry, exhausted, desperate for leadership or just for something to believe in. Thalia stood at the back watching. This isn't working, Declan announced. The crowd murmured. We survived the raid, someone shouted. We got lucky. We got lucky, Declan agreed. Next time they'll bring more men. They'll bring siege weapons. And we'll be dead. He looked around the circle of faces. Scavengers, thieves, killers, the refuse of a dozen worlds. We need to stop acting like prisoners, Declan said. We need to start acting like a crew. He outlined the plan: centralized rations, watch rotations, mixed species teams, a council to arbitrate disputes. No more hoarding, no more tribalism, no more prison rules. And why should we listen to you? Oh, a scarred human heckler yelled. You've been here 3 days. Because I fixed the water, Declan said, and because I know how to turn that scrap pile into a defense perimeter that'll make the next raiders think twice. Laughter rippled through the crowd, skeptical but not hostile. We have a rule, Declan continued. No exploitation. You don't steal from the crew. You don't hurt the crew. You break the rule, you face the council. Break it twice, you walk out that gate, and you don't come back. Silence, heavy and considering. Thalia watched the faces. She knew what they were thinking. Rules meant structure. Structure meant someone in charge. Someone in charge meant tyranny. They'd all been tyrannized before. That's why they were here. She stepped forward. I'll enforce the rule, Thalia said. Her voice carried across the plaza. 500 pairs of eyes turned to her. She felt their weight like a physical pressure. Your coalition, someone spat. I was, Thalia said. Now I'm here, same as you. Why should we trust you? You shouldn't. Thalia pulled her sidearm and held it up for everyone to see. Then she ejected the magazine, cleared the chamber, and handed the weapon to Cross. But you can hold me accountable. That's what the rule means. No one is above it. Not him. She pointed to Declan. Not me. No one. Cross took the weapon, surprise flickering across his reptilian features. The lady speaks truth, the Keth rumbled. I will witness it. One by one others stepped forward. Kale the Avian, a human woman named Sarah, a bronze engineer. They formed the first council of what would become something larger. Thalia realized what she was watching. Not just organization, not just survival protocol. Democracy, raw and messy and impossibly fragile. And she had just sworn to protect it. The Seed Corps had been waiting under the mountain for centuries. Declan found the entrance 3 days later, guided by a child who didn't speak. The boy's name was Silas, maybe 10 years old. Human features, but with eyes that reflected light like a cat's. Silver irises that seemed to see frequencies invisible to everyone else. He'd survived alone in the lava tubes for months, communicating only through gestures and drawings in the ash. Silas took Declan's hand and pulled him toward a fissure in the volcanic rock. Thalia followed, rifle ready. The child squeezed through the crack. They followed. Inside, the cave didn't look like a cave. The walls were smooth metal, seamless, and in the center, a door marked with glowing blue glyphs. Declan ran his hand over the surface. This is advanced tech, way beyond Coalition standard. Thalia stared at the door. She knew those glyphs, had seen them once in her father's private archives. Ancient precursor script. The language of the civilization that had built the jump gates, the terraform engines, the infrastructure, the entire galaxy still used without understanding. It's a seed core, she said quietly. A what? Terraforming infrastructure. Self-replicating fabrication systems. My people, she stopped, corrected herself. The coalition banned this technology. They said it was unstable. Why would they ban the ability to create resources? Thalia didn't answer. She knew why. Because a population that could fabricate anything didn't need to buy anything, didn't need trade, didn't need the coalition. Scarcity was control. Abundance was chaos. She touched the glyphs. They responded to her DNA signature. Cassian genetic markers coded into the system millions of years ago. The door hissed open. The air that rushed out smelled of ozone and possibility. Inside, rows of dormant machinery stretched into darkness. Fabrication units, hydroponic banks, energy cells that could power a city. Declan stood in the doorway, flashlight sweeping across centuries of sleeping technology. "This is impossible," he whispered. "This is deliberate," Thalia said. She walked to the main console. Text scrolled across the screen in multiple languages. She found Galactic Standard and read aloud. Project Drop Site. Sociological Stress Test. Objective measure emergence of cooperative behavior in mixed species populations under existential threat. Declan's flashlight stopped moving. "They built this," he said slowly. "They put the technology here on purpose. Yes, to see if we'd kill each other over it, or work together to use it. Yes," Declan turned to her. "Your father knew." "My father designed it." The words hung in the air between them. Talia felt them like a physical weight. She'd suspected, had known really since the moment she saw House Vance listed in the partial files she'd glimpsed. But saying it out loud made it real, made her complicity real. "I didn't know," she said. "Not when I came here. I thought I was just observing a prison, documenting recidivism. But this," she gestured at the machinery, "this is systematic, calculated." "Evil," Declan finished. "Yes." Silas tugged on Talia's sleeve. The boy pointed deeper into the facility. His silver eyes glowed in the darkness. Thalia followed. At the heart of the seed core, a chamber pulsed with soft blue light. In its center, a crystalline structure that looked organic and mechanical at once. It hummed with a frequency Thalia could feel in her bones. Text appeared on the walls, not projected, growing, like the structure was speaking through the stone itself. Arbiter system online. Detecting biological signatures. Scanning. The light swept over them. Thalia felt it pass through her like water, reading her on levels she didn't have words for. Cassian female. Genetic markers match administrative bloodline. Identity Thalia Vance. Designation Architect's heir. "Architect's heir?" Declan asked. The Arbiter answered. Its voice was genderless, harmonic, and vast. It spoke from everywhere and nowhere. The architect created this facility to test a hypothesis. Can sentient species overcome genetic predisposition toward tribal violence? Can cooperation emerge from competition? Can civilization be chosen instead of inherited? Declan stepped closer to the crystal. "And you judge the test. I measure outcomes. I provide resources proportional to ethical development. I terminate experiments that fail." "Terminate how?" The Arbiter displayed an image. Microscopic machines, billions of them. Nanites designed to disassemble organic matter at the cellular level. "If the social contract dissolves, I release the swarm. I sterilize the site. I reset for the next iteration." Talia felt her blood turn cold. "How many iterations have there been?" 17. "How many succeeded?" 0. The silence that followed was absolute. 17 times the Arbiter had seeded this world with desperate populations. 17 times they had torn each other apart. 17 times the nanites had reduced them to dust. Declan looked at Thalia. "We're iteration 18. "Yes." "And if we fail?" The Arbiter answered with terrible calm. "Estimated survival time after swarm release, 4 minutes. Estimated pain index catastrophic." Declan turned away from the crystal. He walked to the fabrication units, running his hand along their surfaces. Thalia watched him process the information, watched him do the math, watched him arrive at the same conclusion she had. We can't tell them, he said. What? The people up there. If they know there's a sword hanging over their heads, they'll panic, they'll fracture, they'll give the Arbiter exactly what it's looking for. So we lie. We withhold, Declan corrected. We give them hope instead of fear. We focus on what we can build, not what we're building against. Talia thought of her training, of the value her people placed on truth, on data, on perfect information. But she also thought of the faces in the plaza, of the fragile trust beginning to form. You're asking me to manipulate them. I'm asking you to lead them, Declan said. There's a difference. The Arbiter hummed. Decision required. Will you accept designation as steward? Will you bond with this system and guide it as resources? Declan looked at Talia. This thing responds to you. Cassian DNA. You're the one it recognizes. No, Thalia shook her head. You're the engineer. You understand fabrication systems. I don't. But I can't activate it. Only you can, the Arbiter confirmed. Cassian genetic markers required for administrative access. Human markers sufficient for operational interface. Both are needed. Both must choose. Talia understood then. This was the test. Not just building, not just surviving, but choosing to share power. Choosing to work together across species, across backgrounds, across every instinct that said divide and conquer. She looked at Declan, at the man who'd lost everything for principle, who'd shown her that choice mattered more than duty. Together, she asked. Together, he agreed. They placed their hands on the crystal simultaneously. The Arbiter's light enveloped them. Thalia felt the connection form, not painful, but intense, like a new sense awakening. She could feel the seed core systems, the fabrication units humming to life, the power grid spreading through the mountain, the hydroponics beginning their growth cycles. She could feel Declan beside her. His determination, his exhaustion, his stubborn refusal to quit, and she could feel something else. The Arbiter measuring them, judging them, waiting to see if they would use this power to build or destroy. Stewardship accepted. Tier 1 access granted. Observe protocols. Maintain ethical index above minimum threshold. Failure will be corrected. The light faded. Thalia and Declan stood in the chamber, hands still touching the crystal, breathing hard. What did we just agree to? Thalia whispered. To be better than the 17 that came before, Declan said. They worked for 3 weeks to integrate the Seed Corps' resources into the camp. Slowly, carefully. They couldn't just flood the settlement with advanced technology. That would raise questions, suspicions. So they introduced innovations one at a time. Better water filtration. Thalia explained it as salvage from a crashed shuttle. Carbon polymer fabric for shelters. Declan claimed he'd found a manufacturing unit in the lava tubes. Food synthesizers producing protein paste. Attributed to repairs on old coalition equipment. Lies. All of it. But lies that built something real. Thalia found herself spending more time in the council meetings. She thought her role would be enforcement, mediating disputes. But she discovered she had other skills. Languages. She spoke 17 of them fluently, could translate between species that had no cultural common ground. Diplomacy. She'd been trained to negotiate treaties, broker peace agreements, and navigate complex political landscapes. Those skills translated surprisingly well to settling arguments over work rotations and ration distribution. Strategy. She saw patterns, saw how small changes in organization could cascade into major improvements, saw how to build systems that scaled. She was becoming what she'd never intended to be. Not an observer, not a soldier, but an architect of civilization. And it terrified her. The message came on a Tuesday. Not a day of the week, really. Varos didn't have weeks. But Thalia thought of it as Tuesday because that's when everything fell apart. Her wrist console chimed. A priority override signal. Her handler forcing a connection through the destroyed beacon's backup protocols. Status report overdue. Respond immediately. Thalia looked at the message. She was in the greenhouse level of the Seed Corps teaching a group of children how to transplant protein moss. Silas sat beside her, his silver eyes watching her hands with total focus. She stepped away from the children and activated the vocal link. This is Vance. The handler's voice was smooth and cold. You've been dark for 21 days. Explanation required. Equipment malfunction. I'm repairing it. Negative. Telemetry shows deliberate destruction of primary beacon. Are you compromised? Thalia hesitated. 1 second. 2, that was enough. Interesting, the handler said. We're reviewing your biometric data from the last intercept. Heart rate variability, cortisol levels. Oxytocin spiked during combat incident. You're bonding with the subjects. I'm maintaining cover. You're going native. The handler's tone shifted, became almost amused. Do you know what the ratings have been? Exceptional. When Subject Harrow built the water system, our subscription numbers doubled. The audience loves this. They love watching him try, watching him fail. Talia's grip tightened on the console. He hasn't failed. Not yet, but he will. They all do. That's the point of the show, Thalia. The hope makes the fall more satisfying. Show on. Oh, the handler paused. You didn't know. How delightful. Talia felt something cold spreading through her chest. What show? Drop Site Live, premium subscription service. We have 14 million viewers across the coalition. They're watching right now, watching you, watching him, betting on how long you survive, betting on who kills who first. The greenhouse seemed to tilt. Thalia grabbed the railing for support. You're lying. Check your archive. Authorization code 77 Delta Alpha. All the files you weren't cleared to see. All the files your dear father made sure you never found. The handler paused. He's very proud of you, by the way. Says you're performing beautifully. The perfect embedded asset. Cold. Professional. Exactly what a Cassian should be. I destroyed the beacon. We noticed, which is why I'm contacting you through the backup. We can't have our star observer going dark. The audience would riot. Talia looked across the greenhouse, saw Declan in the distance welding a support beam, saw Cross organizing the perimeter patrol, saw Silas showing another child how to nurture the moss, saw civilization being built by people who didn't know they were performing for an audience of millions. You're going to phase 2, the handler continued. Introduce conflict, sabotage the water supply, spread a rumor about hoarding, anything to destabilize the cooperation. The audience is getting bored with the piece. They want drama. No, excuse me. I said no. The handler laughed. Thalia, darling, this isn't a request. This is your mission. Your father approved it personally. If you refuse, we'll interpret that as mission failure and terminate the experiment early. All subjects will be liquidated, including your pet engineer. Talia closed her eyes, felt the weight of the choice crushing down on her. I need time. You have 48 hours. Introduce conflict, or we introduce it for you. And trust me, our methods are much less gentle. The connection cut. Thalia stood in the greenhouse for a long time staring at her hands. Hands that had killed, hands that had built, hands that were shaking now with something that might have been rage or might have been fear. Silas appeared at her elbow. He didn't speak, just looked up at her with those strange silver eyes. Then he took her hand and squeezed it. A small gesture, a child's comfort. It broke something in Thalia. She knelt down and pulled the boy into a hug, felt him tense, surprised, then relax into her arms. When was the last time someone had hugged him? When was the last time anyone on Veros had been hugged? When she pulled back, she saw Declan watching from across the room. He walked over. You okay? No, Thalia said. I need to show you something. They went deep into the seed core to a terminal Thalia had been avoiding. She entered the authorization code the handler had given her. Files bloomed across the screen. Thousands of them. Declan read over her shoulder. Subscription data, viewer analytics, revenue projections, betting pools on which subjects would die first. Highlight reels edited for maximum emotional impact. Marketing campaigns selling the authentic, primitive survival experience. And there in a folder marked Administrative Oversight, a list of investors. Declan scrolled down, stopped. His face went pale. House Vance, principal investor. 500 million credits. He looked at Talia. She couldn't meet his eyes. Your father. Yes. He's making money from this. From us. Yes. Declan stepped back. The betrayal on his face was worse than any weapon. You knew. Not when I came here, I swear it. I thought I was just observing. I didn't know about the show, Didn't know about the subscriptions. Didn't know my father was... Her voice broke. I didn't know I was eating the dead. She sank to the floor back against the console. For 30 years, she'd been proud of her heritage, proud of House Vance, proud of her father's position in the coalition. And all of it was built on this, on suffering monetized, on death commodified, on people like Declan thrown into the fire so rich people could watch them burn. I need to get something, Thalia said. She stood abruptly and left before Declan could respond. She went to the archive level. The crashed ship Silas had shown them weeks ago. She'd been avoiding it, avoiding what she knew she'd find there. The ship's name was Herald of Dawn, a coalition diplomatic courier. It had gone down 6 years ago in a dust storm. Inside the archive was still intact. Physical hard copies of documents too sensitive for digital transmission. Thalia found the safe, opened it with her administrative codes. Inside, a leather-bound ledger. She opened it. Project Drop Site Comprehensive Financial Report. She turned pages, read the itemized expenses. The cost of terraforming Varos into a death world. The cost of the prison barges. The cost of the observation satellites. The cost of the marketing campaign. And then the revenue. 14 million subscribers at 50 credits per month. 700 million credits monthly. 8.4 billion annually. Return on investment 1,000%. She found the investor list, saw her father's name, saw his signature, and then she saw something that made her stop breathing. Asset compensation. A list of embedded observers, agents placed among the prisoners to shape narratives, to ensure maximum drama. Asset L7 Thalia Vance, embedded observer. Compensation 50 million credits upon successful mission completion. 50 million credits. She hadn't known, hadn't agreed to it, but her father had sold her services without her consent, had turned her into a performer in his grotesque theater. She was a participant, not a victim, a collaborator, not a casualty. Thalia closed the ledger, walked out of the archive, found Cross on the perimeter wall. I need your knife, she said. Cross looked at her, saw something in her face that made him hand over the blade without question. Thalia went to a quiet corner of the settlement, alone. She knelt in the ash and reached behind her ear, found the small bump where the neural implant sat, the backup transmitter, the one she'd forgotten about because it was passive, only receiving, not sending. But it was still there, still connecting her to the coalition, still making her part of the system. She pressed the knife against her skin and cut. The pain was immediate and catastrophic. She felt the blade scrape against metal, felt the implant resisting. She cut deeper, biting down on her sleeve to muffle the scream. The implant came free in a spray of purple blood. She pulled it out and threw it into the ash, stomped on it until the circuitry shattered. Only then did she let herself collapse. Declan found her an hour later. She was pale, leaning against a wall, a crude bandage wrapped around her head. Blood had soaked through. He knelt beside her without a word, pulled out his medical kit, and replaced her bandage with proper sealing foam. You could have asked for help, he said quietly. This was mine to do. Is it done? The link is severed. They can't track me anymore. Can't contact me. Can't use me. She looked at him. I'm truly alone now. No, Declan said. You're not. He helped her stand, walked her back to the main plaza. The council was meeting. Cross, Kale, Sarah. They looked up as Thalia entered. We need to make a broadcast, Thalia said. Her voice was steady despite the pain. I need to show you something. All of you. She connected the ledger files to the main projector, showed them everything, the subscription service, the betting pools, the investor list, the compensation for embedded assets, showed them House Vance, showed them her own name. When she finished, the silence was absolute. I was sent here to watch you fail, Thalia said, to document your violence, to prove that civilization is a lie we tell ourselves before we pull the trigger. My father designed this test, profited from it, and her voice cracked. I helped him, not knowingly, but that doesn't matter. I was a tool of this system. I wore its symbols. I carried its weapons. I am the thing that condemned you. She stood in the center of the council chamber waiting for judgment. Cross spoke first. You could have hidden this. Yes. You could have kept taking their money. Yes. Why didn't you? Talia looked at Declan, at the man who'd thrown away everything for truth, who'd taught her that choice mattered more than comfort. Because I can't build civilization on a foundation of lies, she said. Because if we're going to survive, it has to be real. All of it, the good and the ugly. Kale stepped forward. The avian's feathers were ruffled, agitated. What you're saying is we're being watched. Right now. This conversation is entertainment. Yes. And if we fail to entertain, they kill us. Yes. Then let's give them a show they'll never forget. The council voted, unanimous. They would broadcast the truth, would expose the coalition's crimes to the entire galaxy, would show 14 million viewers exactly what they'd been paying to watch. The death of their complicity. Thalia stood before the main transmitter, Declan beside her. Behind them, the council. Behind the council, 500 people who'd been reduced to content but refused to stay commodified. This is Thalia Vance, she said into the camera. Her voice was strong, clear. Daughter of Patriarch Aldrich Vance, envoy of the coalition, embedded observer for Project Dropsite. She held up the ledger. I was sent here to watch Declan Harrow die, to watch all of you die, to document your suffering for profit, to prove that sentient beings under pressure revert to savagery. She paused, let the words sink in. I am here to report mission failure. The subjects did not revert to savagery. They built a government. They established laws. They chose cooperation over competition. They chose each other. She looked directly into the camera. I am Thalia Vance. I helped build this hell, and now I will end it. I am releasing the complete financial records of Project Dropsite. Every investor, every transaction, every death you paid to watch. The galaxy will know what you did, and history will judge you for it. She transmitted the files, sent them to every news outlet, every government, every independent network she could access, fired them into the void and hoped someone would catch them. Then she smashed the transmitter. The screen went dark. The connection severed. The performance ended. Thalia turned to face the people behind her, saw fear, saw anger, saw something else, something that looked almost like pride. They'll come for us now, Cross said. I know, Thalia replied. We should prepare. I know. Declan touched her arm. She looked at him. His face was bruised, exhausted, and absolutely certain. You just declared war on the entire coalition. I know. He smiled grimly. Good. Let's win it. The coalition response came not with fanfare, but with silence. For 2 days after Thalia's broadcast, nothing happened. The sky remained its pale blue. The settlement continued its work. People whispered in corners, glancing at the horizon like animals sensing a storm. Thalia stood on the perimeter wall watching, waiting. She knew her father, knew how the coalition operated. The silence was strategic. Let the subjects relax. Let them hope. Let them believe for just a moment that exposure equaled safety. Then crush them. Declan climbed the ladder to join her. He moved slower these days. The wound from the feral attack had never fully healed. He'd pushed too hard, worked too long, and now he paid the price in stiff movements and careful breathing. You should be resting, Thalia said. I'll rest when I'm dead. He leaned against the railing beside her. How long do you think we have? They're already here. Declan followed her gaze upward. The sky looked empty, but Thalia had been trained to see what others missed. The subtle distortion of light, the faint shimmer of cloaking fields. Stealth ships, she said. At least 6, probably more. They're waiting for nightfall. Can the Arbiter's defenses handle them? I don't know. The planetary grid is designed for atmospheric threats. Ground assault. These are orbital insertion pods, fast, precise. They'll punch through before the turrets can track them. Declan hesitated, then smiled. It was a tired smile, but real. Remember when the biggest problem was getting clean water? Thalia almost laughed. Simpler times. 3 weeks ago. Feels like years. They stood together in the fading light. Below them, the settlement was alive. Children playing in the plaza. Workers reinforcing the walls. Kyle teaching a medical class. Cross drilling the militia with military precision. A civilization in miniature. Fragile. Precious. built on hope and spite, and the stubborn refusal to die conveniently. Whatever happens tonight, Declan said quietly, I want you to know something. Talia looked at him. You saved my life on that first day, he continued, but I think maybe I saved yours too. We saved each other, and then we saved this. He gestured at the settlement. That's worth something, that's worth everything. Talia felt something tight in her chest. Declan, don't. He held up a hand. Don't make promises. Don't say we'll survive this. Just know that it mattered and you matter. Before she could respond, the sky tore open. 6 white streaks burned through the atmosphere. Not ships, insertion pods. They hit the bone fields a mile north with impacts that shook the ground. The sound came seconds later. 6 thunderclaps that rolled across the wasteland like artillery. The alarm bells rang. Thalia was moving before the sound faded. Down the ladder, across the plaza, shouting orders that people actually followed because somewhere in the last month, she'd become someone they trusted. Militia to the north wall, non-combatants to the core chambers, medical teams prepare for casualties. Cross appeared at her side, a rifle charged and ready. How many? 6 pods, 30 soldiers each, maybe more. They're Black Ops, Ghost Division. The Keth's scales rippled. Fear or excitement, Thalia couldn't tell. We fought worse. No, Thalia said, we haven't. The pods opened like black iron flowers. Soldiers emerged in stealth armor that shifted color to match the gray ash. They moved with unnatural speed, accompanied by hovering combat drones equipped with rotary cannons. Thalia watched through the scope of her railgun. These weren't prison guards. These weren't even regular military. These were the soldiers the coalition sent when they wanted something erased from history. The attack began with precision. No demands, no communication. Just a systematic advance on the settlement perimeter. The drones swept ahead, sensors painting targets. The soldiers followed in perfect formation. Declan stood beside Thalia on the wall, coordinating the defense. West Quadrant needs reinforcement. Sarah, take your team. The explosion cut him off. A missile from one of the drones struck the wall 50 feet away. The carbon polymer shattered. Bodies flew. Thalia felt the shockwave punch through her chest. Her ears rang. She couldn't hear Declan shouting beside her. Then she saw him stagger. Saw the red spreading across his side. Saw him reach for the railing and miss. He went down hard. Declan. Thalia dropped her rifle and fell to her knees beside him. Blood was pooling under his ribs. Too much blood. The shrapnel had torn through his old wound, reopening it catastrophically. His eyes were unfocused, lips already pale. Medic, Thalia screamed. I need a medic now. Cale appeared, his feathered hands already reaching for supplies. He looked at the wound and his expression went carefully blank. The expression of someone who'd seen too many deaths to waste time on false hope. Get him to the core, Cale said. I'll do what I can. I'm fine, Declan rasped. His hand found Talia's arm, gripped it with surprising strength. The defense can wait. No, he pulled her closer. Listen to me, the Arbiter. Only you can activate the heavy weapons. Cassian DNA. You have to, he coughed, blood on his lips. You have to lead them. Talia looked at his face, saw the pain, saw the certainty, saw him asking her to leave him bleeding on the wall while soldiers tore their world apart. She realized what he'd done. All those weeks of training her, teaching her strategy, letting her handle the council, letting her speak for them. He'd been preparing for this, for the moment when he couldn't lead anymore. When the burden would fall on her alone. He'd known he was a liability, had known his body was failing, and he'd spent his last strength making sure she could stand without him. I can't do this without you, she whispered. Yes, Declan said. You can. You always could. I just helped you see it. More explosions. Closer now. The wall was failing. Cross was shouting orders, trying to hold the line. Talia looked at Declan, at Kale, at the settlement burning behind them. She made her choice. Get him to safety, she told Kale. Keep him alive. That's an order. She stood, picked up her railgun, walked to the edge of the wall where Cross was directing fire. The west section is collapsing, the Keth growled. We need to fall back to secondary. No, Thalia said, her voice cut through the chaos. We activate the Arbiter's defense grid. That could trigger the purge protocol. If we use violence, this isn't violence, it's survival. There's a difference. She closed her eyes, felt the connection to the seed core humming in her bones, felt the arbiter waiting, judging. Arbiter, she said aloud. Authorization Thalia Vance. Activate planetary defense grid. Target designation all coalition forces within settlement perimeter. The arbiter's voice resonated through her skull. Lethal force authorization requires ethical justification. State reason. We're defending our home. We're protecting our people. We're choosing to live. Silence. 1 second, 2, 3. Then, justification accepted. Defense grid activated. The ground shook. Not from explosions, from something waking beneath the mountain. Turrets that had slept for centuries rose from hidden emplacements around the settlement. Their barrels glowed blue-white. The first volley turned night into day. Plasma beams tore across the bone fields. The coalition drones evaporated. The stealth soldiers scattered, their camouflage systems overloaded by the energy discharge. Some made it to cover. Most didn't. The attack that was supposed to be surgical and silent became a massacre. Thalia watched through her scope, watched men die, felt nothing, felt everything, felt the weight of command settling on her shoulders like a physical thing. This was what leadership meant. Not speeches, not laws, but standing on a wall while people died on her orders and living with the necessity of it. The coalition forces retreated in chaos. Thalia didn't pursue, didn't need to. The message was sent. Clear, unmistakable. Varos would not die quietly. She found Declan in the medical bay unconscious on a surgical table. Kale had his hands inside the wound, sealing torn vessels with foam and prayer. The avian's feathers were stained purple with Cassian, blood red with human. Will he live? Thalia asked. Ask me in 6 hours. Thalia sat beside the table, took Declan's hand. It was cold. She held it anyway. Whispered words in Cassian that she'd never spoken to anyone. Words that meant, I see you, I choose you, I will not let you fall alone. The wrist console on her other arm chimed. Priority signal. She almost ignored it. Then she saw the source. Coalition command. Encoded. Urgent. She accepted. Overseer Mordain's face appeared. He was older than she remembered. 55 at least. Gray at the temples. Lines around his eyes that spoke of decades spent implementing orders he didn't believe in. Envoy Vance, he said. His voice was tired. Or should I say President Vance? I'm not a president. No, you just repelled a military assault, activated weapons of mass destruction, made demands on behalf of a sovereign entity. That sounds like a head of state to me. What do you want, Mordain? To offer terms. Surrender now. Turn over yourself and subject Harrow. The rest will be granted clemency and relocation to rehabilitation colonies. You're lying. Yes, he smiled. It was sad. I am. There is no clemency. There is no relocation. Your father has issued a sterilization order. If you don't surrender in the next 12 hours, we deploy an atmospheric weapon, a hypercyclone. It will strip this planet down to bedrock. Thalia felt the blood drain from her face. You can't. We can, we will. The prototype is already in position. Weather control array stationed at the Spire of Tears. It's automated. Even if you somehow manage to reach it, you'd need coalition codes to shut it down. Why are you telling me this? Mordain hesitated, searching for words. When he spoke, his voice was soft, almost human. Because I'm tired, Thalia. Tired of watching good people dying for bad reasons. Tired of following orders from men who see sentient beings as inventory. Your father sent me here to clean up his mess, to erase you, Harrow, all of it, to make sure the scandal goes away quietly. He leaned closer to the camera. But I saw your broadcast. I saw what you built. And I find myself hoping against all logic and experience that you find a way to survive this. That someone somewhere proves that the coalition doesn't get to decide who lives and who gets erased. If you feel that way, why deploy the weapon? Because I'm a coward, Mordain said simply. Because I have a pension, a family, a life I'm not brave enough to throw away. Because I'm not you, Thalia. I'm just the man who pulls the trigger when ordered. The connection cut. Thalia sat in the medical bay holding Declan's hand and felt the weight of impossible choices crushing down on her. 12 hours. Less probably. Mordain would accelerate the timeline. Make sure there was no chance for escape or miracle. She looked at Declan, still unconscious, still barely alive. He couldn't climb, couldn't fight, could barely breathe without pain. But she could. 2 hours after Mordane's call, Thalia's personal console chimed again. Different frequency, heavily encrypted. Source Coalition flagship. Her father's face appeared. Patriarch Aldrich Vance looked older. The lines around his eyes had deepened. His perfect composure cracked at the edges. Thalia, he said, his voice was ice. Do you have any idea what you've done? I exposed the truth. You destroyed our house, our name, our legacy. The council is calling for my resignation. 16 worlds have suspended trade agreements. Our assets are being frozen. Talia met his eyes through the screen. Saw no remorse there, only fury at being caught. Good, she said simply. Good. Aldrich's composure shattered. I built everything for you, every credit, every alliance, every sacrifice, so you could inherit an empire. You built it on corpses, Father. I don't want an empire built on suffering. You're naive. Civilization requires hard choices, requires people like me willing to make them. No, Thalia said. Civilization requires people willing to choose differently. You taught me to observe without feeling, to analyze without empathy, to see sentient beings as data. She leaned closer to the camera. But I found something you never anticipated. I found people who chose cooperation over competition, who chose each other over survival, who proved that your entire philosophy is a lie. Aldrich was silent for a long moment. You are no daughter of mine. No, Tia agreed. I'm not. I'm a daughter of Varos now, and we're going to show the galaxy what real civilization looks like. She terminated the connection. It was the last time she ever spoke to her father. Thalia stood, kissed Declan's forehead, whispered, "Thank you for showing me how to choose." Then she went to find Silas. The boy was in the core chamber, hands pressed against the Arbiter's crystal. His silver eyes glowed in the darkness. He turned when Thalia entered. I need your help, she said. Silas tilted his head, waiting. There's a weapon at the Spire of Tears. It's going to kill everyone here. I need to climb up and destroy it. And I need you to come with me because you're the only one who can interface with coalition systems. The boy's expression didn't change. He was 10 years old, a child. She was asking him to climb a mountain in a hurricane and hack a weapon designed by the most advanced military in the galaxy. She was asking him to risk his life. Silas held out his hand. Thalia took it. They left at dawn. Thalia, Silas, and Cross, who refused to let them go alone. The sky was already changing, green clouds gathering on the horizon. The air tasted of metal and electricity. The hypercyclone was building. They moved fast across the bone fields. No stealth, no caution, just speed. They had maybe 6 hours before the storm hit full force. The Spire of Tears rose 3,000 feet from the desert floor. Black obsidian smooth as glass, unclimbable under normal circumstances. These were not normal circumstances. Thalia fired a magnetic grapple. The line sang as it bit into the rock. She looked at Cross. Stay here. Coordinate evacuation if we fail. And if you succeed, then we'll have earned the right to call this place home. She clipped Silas into a harness connected to hers. The boy weighed almost nothing. He looked up at the summit, 3,000 feet of vertical nightmare, and showed no fear. Children raised in hell learn not to fear heights. They began to climb. The wind hit them at 500 feet. Not natural wind. Weaponized air currents swirling around the spire like a blade. Thalia's muscles screamed. Her fingers went numb. The grapple line whined under the strain. At 1,000 feet, the drones found them. Automated sentries. Small, fast, armed with precision lasers. They dove at the climbers, forcing Thalia to climb one-handed while firing her sidearm with the other. She hit one, missed two. The third scored her shoulder. The pain was white-hot. The smell of burned meat filled her helmet. Silas pressed his hand against her back. She felt something pulse through the harness. Electromagnetic interference. The remaining drones spiraled out of control and fell. Good boy, Thalia gasped. They kept climbing. At 2,000 feet, the rain started. Not water, chemical sleet that burned where it touched. Thalia's suit held barely. but the exposed skin on her neck blistered. She climbed faster. At 2,500 feet, her comms crackled. Declan's voice weak but clear. Thalia, can you hear me? You should be resting. I'm done resting. Listen, I've been reviewing the Arbiter's schematics. The array you're climbing toward, it has a failsafe. If you overload it wrong, the backlash will vaporize everything within 5 miles, including the settlement. Then I won't overload it wrong. I'm serious. You need to calibrate the feedback loop to exactly 3.7 gigawatts. Not higher, not lower. If you bam, Declan, Thalia stopped climbing, hung in the harness, wind tearing at her. Did you know you'd be too injured to climb? Silence. Then I suspected. You trained me to do this without you. I trained you to lead, to make hard calls, to stand when everyone else fell. His voice was soft. I'm sorry I can't be there with you. You are with me, Talia said. Everything I know about choosing right over easy I learned from watching you. You're in every decision I make. Then make the right one now. Come back alive. I'll try, Omai. She climbed. The summit was a plateau of black glass. In the center, the weather array rose like a twisted sculpture. Metal and crystal and technology that bent the atmosphere to its will. Around the base of the array stood a single figure. Overseer Mordain. He wore a heavy environmental suit against the chemical rain. In his hand, a detonator, wired directly to the array's core. Thalia pulled herself over the edge, stood, unclipped Silas, and set him down gently. You came, Mordain said. He sounded surprised. Did you think I wouldn't? I hoped you wouldn't. Hoped you'd be smart. Take the evacuation window I left open in the southern quadrant. Save who you could and run. We don't run. No. Mordain looked at her, at the burns on her neck, at the blood on her suit, at the child standing beside her. No, you don't. Your father would be proud, or horrified. I'm not sure there's a difference anymore. He sent you to kill me. He sent me to clean up a PR problem. But yes, killing you is part of the contract. Mordain raised the detonator. This is wired to blow if I release the pressure switch. If you shoot me, the array overloads. The backlash destroys your settlement. If I press the button, same result. If you try to run, I trigger it manually. Then we're at an impasse. No, Mordain said. We're at the end. I'm just trying to decide if I want to be remembered as the man who executed you or the man who gave you a chance to make me stop. Talia studied his face, saw the exhaustion there, the weight of decades spent following orders, the slow erosion of a soul worn down by compromise. She holstered her weapon. What are you doing? Mordain asked. Refusing to kill you. Talia took a step forward. You said you were tired of watching good people die for bad reasons. So stop. Right now, this moment. Choose something different. You don't understand. If I let you live, they'll erase my family, my pension, everything I've built. Everything you've built, Thalia said, is a cage. You just didn't notice the bars because they were made of comfort. She took another step. I know what it's like, she continued. I was my father's perfect weapon, perfect observer, perfect tool. I built my whole identity around serving him, around being what he needed me to be. Another step. And then one day I watched a man choose principle over survival, choose truth over comfort, choose to build instead of destroy. And I realized I had the same choice. I could keep being a tool, or I could break. She was close now, close enough to touch him. You're a tool too, Mordain, and you're tired of it. I can see it in your eyes. You didn't have to tell me about the array, didn't have to give me a chance. You could have just triggered it from orbit and filed the report. But you came here, stood in the storm, gave me time to reach you. Talia held out her hand, because some part of you wants to choose differently, wants to break free, wants to prove that you're more than the sum of your orders. Mordain stared at her hand, at the burns and scars and evidence of someone who'd fought for something beyond herself. If I lower this detonator, he said quietly, I can never go home. No, Talia agreed, but you can be home, here, with us, with people who choose each other instead of consuming each other. I'm 55 years old, too old to start over. Declan was 32 when they threw him away. I'm 30. It's never too late to choose who you want to be next. The wind howled around them. The array hummed with gathering power. The storm was building toward a critical mass. Mordain looked at the detonator in his hand, then at Thalia, then at Silas watching with those strange silver eyes. I'm a coward, he said. No, Thalia replied. You're afraid. There's a difference. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing right despite it. Mordain's hands shook. The detonator trembled. Then slowly he lowered it, set it on the ground, stepped back. I'm sorry, he whispered, for all of it. For every order I followed, for every person I erased, for being too afraid to stop until you made me see I could. Talia picked up the detonator, carefully, handed it to Silas. Can you disarm this? The boy nodded, pressed his hands against the device. His eyes glowed brighter. The detonator went dark, inert, harmless. Good, Thalia said. Now the array. Silas walked to the weather control system, placed his small hands on the interface panel. Thalia watched the symbols scroll across the screen. Coalition encryption, military-grade firewalls, systems designed to resist tampering. But Silas wasn't tampering. He was speaking their language, asking politely, showing them that shutdown was better than overload, that peace was better than destruction. The array's hum changed pitch, lowered. The green clouds began to dissipate. The chemical rain stopped. The wind died down to something almost gentle. Thalia activated her comms. Declan, we're clear. The storm, neutralized. We're coming home. Thalia looked at Mordain, at the broken man who'd chosen breaking free. We picked up a stray. They descended the spire as the sky cleared. For the first time in 50 years, Varos saw blue. Not purple, not green, not the color of poison or death, just blue, simple, beautiful, impossible. At the base, Cross waited with a transport. He looked at Mordain with suspicion and recognition. This is the man who came to kill us, the Keth growled. This is the man who chose not to, Thalia corrected. He's asking for asylum. Cross studied Mordain for a long moment, then grunted. The council will decide. Until then, you're a guest. Act like one. They rode back to the settlement in silence. Thalia watched the landscape pass, saw the first hints of green pushing through the black ash, saw the Arbiter's terraforming protocols activating now that the ethical threshold had been met, saw a dead world learning to breathe. At the medical bay, Declan was sitting up, pale, weak, alive. He looked at Talia, and something in his expression broke open. She crossed the room and kissed him. Not desperately, not frantically, just with the certainty of someone who knew exactly what she was choosing and would choose it again every time. We did it, she said when they pulled apart. You did it, Declan corrected. I just tried not to die while you were gone. How'd that go? About as well as expected. 6 months later, the settlement had a new name. Not a camp, not a prison, a city. Vance City, some called it after Thalia. Harrow's Landing, others said after Declan. But the sign at the gate read simply, New Beginning. The council chamber was full. Representatives from every species, every background. They were arguing about zoning laws, about water rights, about whether the new school should teach coalition standard or develop their own language. Boring, administrative, beautiful. Thalia sat at the head of the table, not because she'd seized power, but because they'd voted. 3 separate elections over 6 months. Every single time, the result was unanimous. She was first speaker. The voice of Varos in the galaxy that was just beginning to acknowledge they existed. Declan sat to her right, chief engineer, still recovering but stubborn. He argued with Cross about bridge construction with the passion of someone who cared deeply about load-bearing calculations. Mordain sat near the back, not on the council yet, not fully trusted yet, but present, learning, teaching the next generation of Lauders about coalition politics so they could dismantle it from within. The meeting dragged on. Finally, Thalia called a recess, stepped outside for air. The sky was blue. The temperature was comfortable. In the distance, she could see the terraforming progress. Actual trees, actual grass. Life returning to a world that had been murdered and refused to stay dead. Declan joined her on the balcony. The trade syndicate sent another offer, he said. They want to establish a permanent embassy, official recognition. That's the fifth government this month. We're becoming legitimate, respectable. Terrifying. Declan laughed. You'll do fine. I don't know how to be a president. Good thing you're not a president. You're a speaker. You speak for people who couldn't speak for themselves. That's all you've ever done. Talia looked at him, at the man who'd shown her that choice mattered, that principle trumped pragmatism. That civilization wasn't inherited, it was chosen in every single day in 1,000 small decisions to be better than your worst instincts. What do we do now, she asked. Now, Declan smiled. We keep building, we teach the next generation. We prove that what we started here wasn't luck or accident. We prove it can be replicated. That cooperation beats competition. That empathy isn't weakness. And when the coalition comes back, they will, but they won't be facing a settlement anymore. They'll be facing a nation. Talia took his hand, squeezed it. I'm glad you fell on my planet. I'm glad you decided to catch me. Inside, the council was reconvening, arguments about school curricula and agricultural zoning waiting, the boring essential work of civilization. Thalia and Declan walked back together, equal partners, two people who'd been thrown into hell and built something that looked, if you squinted, almost like heaven. At the entrance, Silas waited. The boy had grown in 6 months taller, healthier, his silver eyes brighter. He'd started speaking carefully at first, then with growing confidence. Now he ran a school for other children, teaching them how to interface with technology, how to see the patterns others missed. But more importantly, he taught them they weren't tools. They were people, and people got to choose what they became. Speaker Vance, he said, his voice quiet but steady. The council is waiting. Talia knelt to his level. How's the teaching going? Good. I have 12 students now. One of them, Kira, she can interface with the hydroponics faster than me. Pride colored his voice. She'll be better than I am. That's what teaching is, Talia said. Building something better than yourself. Silas smiled. It was a rare thing. Precious. You taught me that. No, Thalia said softly. You taught me. You showed me that even when the world tries to turn you into a weapon, you can choose to be something else. Something better. She stood, walked into the council chamber, took her seat, called the meeting to order. Outside the window, a ship descended through the blue sky. Not coalition, not military. A transport from the Free Trade Syndicate carrying supplies and refugees from other worlds who'd heard the story and wanted to see if it was real. If it was possible to build something good from something terrible. If choice really mattered more than circumstance. The answer, Talia thought, was being written every day. In every argument settled without violence. In every resource shared instead of hoarded. In every time someone chose the harder right over the easier wrong. The broadcast that had started this had gone across the galaxy. 14 million viewers had watched Thalia confess her complicity and choose differently. Some called her a traitor. Some called her a hero. She was neither. She was just someone who'd been given a choice and made it. Who'd kept making it. Who'd learned that civilization wasn't a destination, but a direction. The direction toward each other instead of away. And if that was worth dying for, it was worth living for too. The sign at the city gate was visible from the council chamber window, etched in metal salvaged from the first prison barges. Polished bright, defiant. It read, "A woman refused to watch, she built a nation instead." Thalia looked at those words and felt Declan's hand find hers under the table. Felt the warmth of it, the certainty. She thought of the girl she'd been 6 months ago. The perfect instrument. The observer trained never to feel. The daughter who'd spent 30 years earning her father's approval. That girl was gone. Erased not by violence, but by choice. By the slow accumulation of moments when she'd chosen connection over detachment. Chosen people over protocol. Chosen to build instead of destroy. The council was arguing again. Crossing Kyle, debating bridge materials with the intensity of people who cared deeply about infrastructure. Mordain was teaching a young representative about coalition parliamentary procedure, his voice patient, almost gentle. Outside ships were landing. More refugees. More people who'd heard the story and wanted to see if it was real. Thalia squeezed Declan's hand. He squeezed back. No words needed. They'd built this together. Not perfectly, not easily, but built it nonetheless. And tomorrow they'd keep building, because that's what civilization was. Not a destination, just a direction. The direction toward each other instead of away. The meeting continued. Debates about water allocation, proposals for a new medical wing, arguments about whether to accept the trade syndicate's offer or remain independent. Democracy in action. Messy, frustrating, beautiful. Through the window, Thalia could see the school where Silas taught. Children of a dozen species learning together, playing together, building friendships that crossed every line the coalition had drawn to keep them separate. She saw the memorial wall they'd built, names etched in stone, every person who died in the raids, the attacks, the desperate early days. Not forgotten, never forgotten, but honored. Remembered as the foundation on which something better was being built. She saw the gardens beginning to bloom. Real plants now, not just protein moss. Flowers, vegetables, trees that would one day provide shade for children who hadn't been born yet. Legacy, future, hope. The things her father had never understood. The things he tried to quantify and control and ultimately destroy because they couldn't be owned. Thalia released Declan's hand and stood. "Before we continue," she said, her voice cutting through the debate, "I want to say something." The room quieted. Every face turned toward her. "6 months ago, I stood in this plaza and told you the truth about who I was, what I'd done, what I'd been sent here to do." She looked around the room. "Many of you had every reason to kill me, to exile me, to make me pay for my father's crimes." She paused. "But you didn't. You chose something harder. You chose to let me earn my place among you. To prove through action, not words, that I changed, that I could be trusted." Talia's eyes found Cross, then Kyle, then Sarah, then Silas standing by the door. "I want you to know that I haven't forgotten that gift, that mercy, and I never will. Every decision I make remembering that you gave me a second chance when you had no reason to." She looked out the window at the city they'd built. "We're going to face hard times ahead. The coalition won't forget us, won't forgive us. They'll come back with bigger armies, better weapons, more sophisticated tactics. They'll try to break us, to prove we were wrong, to show the galaxy that what we built here can't last." Talia turned back to the council. "But I believe they're wrong. I believe what we have here, this messy, imperfect, beautiful experiment in choosing each other, is stronger than any weapon they can throw at us. Not because we're perfect, but because we're trying. Because we keep choosing every single day to be better than we were yesterday." She sat down. The room was silent for a moment. Then Cross stood. The massive Kaith warrior, scarred and fierce, looked at Thalia with something that might have been respect. "The speaker speaks truth," he rumbled. "We are not perfect, but we are trying, and that is enough." One by one others stood. Kael, Sarah, Mordain, even the youngest council member, barely 20, stood and nodded. "Enough talk," Cross said, his mandibles clicking in what passed for a Keth smile. "We have a city to build. Let us build it." The meeting continued, but something had shifted. The debates were still fierce, the disagreements still real. But there was an understanding now, a shared purpose. They weren't just arguing about zoning laws and water rights. They were building the future, and they were building it together.